Okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to resume the discussion of the complete Keynesian model. I'll start with a recapitulation of what we discussed in the last class. So the problem that we discussed was uh, what is the Keynesian aggregate demand curve? How to derive the aggregate demand curve in the Keynesian model. In the classical model, the assumption was that whatever was supplied will creates its own demand, what we know as Say's law. But in the case of the Keynesian demand curve, the question is that okay, we are supplying a certain amount, but will there be sufficient demand? Now, Keynes assumed that the problem, in the economy, the problem is in the demand side. There's a depression, output is below the capacity level, and therefore demand is not a problem. If demand increases, then supply will automatically uh, improve. So you have a capacity that is lying unutilized, you have excess capacity, you have unemployment. So meeting the demand is not a problem in the Keynesian case. So in other words, the Keynesian case uh, is a horizontal curve. This is the supply curve. This is horizontal, and whatever is the demand, the producers can meet this demand without an increase in prices. But we know that this is a rather specific situation. This type of supply curve will can be observed, but only under very restrictive assumptions. In general, the supply curve will be upward sloping. Okay, in that case, if the supply curve is outward sloping, then it is the interaction of the demand and supply curve which determines price and output. Okay. Now, in the IS market, the commodity market, the equilibrium condition was IR, investment as a function of interest plus G equal to savings, which is a function of income and taxes. So these are all real variables that are not influenced by changes in price level. So if there's a change in the price, this will not affect the IS curve. The IS curve will remain same. So you can see over here that we have an IS curve. Whatever the price level, the IS curve will remain the same. When we turn to the money market, the LM market, the equilibrium condition was that real money supply is equal to real money demand. Now, as long as price is constant, there's no need to distinguish between real and money values. But if prices rise, the LM curve will shift M by P1. You can see that as prices are rising from P0 to P1 and P2, the LM curve will shift leftwards. So the equilibrium output is going to decrease. So corresponding to P0, we have output Y0. When prices increase to P1, output falls to Y1, and so on. So we can use this to derive an aggregate demand curve. So this is the demand curve that we have, and the supply curve is, in the Keynesian case, extreme Keynesian case, ISLM model, and also simple Keynesian model. The supply curve is horizontal. Okay. Okay, so this is the impact of changes in the tax function. This is, in that case, there will be a shift in the aggregate demand curve. This is a case of increased government spending. Again, output will shift, the demand curve will shift, and so on. Okay, so we can once we introduce prices into the Keynesian flexible prices into the Keynesian model, we can analyze that what is the impact of changes in money supply, what are the impact of changes in tax rate, and government spending in the Keynesian model. You can see, for instance, over here, if you put in the supply curve, if you draw the supply curve over here, then you can see that if there's a change in the tax rate, this is going to, the tax rates go up, then the equilibrium will fall from here to here. Prices will fall, but so will output. Then we've shifted to the, we try to focus on how the classical model is and the Keynesian model differ from each other. Now, the central tenet of the classical model is regarding the labor market. It was basically assumed that in the labor market, you have the classical auction type bargaining. You have the workers coming and bargaining with the employers, and the bargaining is in terms of money wages. So money wages adjust, but remember that the workers have perfect information. They know what is the real wage, what is the price level. So if they find out what is money wage and they know prices, they also know what is real wage. And remember that fundamentally, it is the real wage which is important. They may bargain in terms of money wage, but the real wage provides the purchasing power. They also know the wages in different sectors, who is paying what wage, and so on. Now, in the Keynesian case, we said that we had wage rigidity, or more specifically, we had a rigidity, downward rigidity of money wage because of three reasons. The focus was on wage differentials, you had formal contracts, and even in the informal sector, when you did not have formal contracts, employers tried to keep to the bargain. So let us see what happens if we introduce fixed money wages into the market. So if we introduced fixed money wages, it means that this is going to be the money wage, it cannot change. So therefore the supply curve becomes redundant. So given the money wage, you simply find out, looking at the demand curve, how much the firms are willing to buy. This is the marginal product of labor, and if you're multiplying by price, you get the value of marginal product, VMP curve. So if prices increase, the VMP curve shifts outward, firms demand more labor, output goes up, and we can see that the supply curve is upward sloping.
So can you show the previous slide once?
Yeah.
Sir, can you explain this once again, please?
Acha. See, this is the, okay, can't explain this. I'm just assuming that the marginal product curve is a straight line. জাস্ট আঁকার সুবিধার জন্য করে দিচ্ছি এটা. Obviously it should be a curve, but
Sir, marginal product curve to plot হয় against number of labor employed and output. So how are we plotting it here in wage and employment?
employment মানে কি? Number of workers?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা। So this is the ND curve, which is defined as the value of marginal product. Price into marginal product of labor. So this is number of workers, and over here you have the marginal product and wages. Okay. Okay. আচ্ছা না এইটা ইউজ করলে চলবে না। Oh, I forgot. This is the supply curve of labor. আচ্ছা। আচ্ছা, now if you look at the classical model, the intersection of the demand and supply curves will determine the wages. ঠিক আছে? Actually, it should be real wages over here if we take the classical model, but forget about the difference. Okay, এখানে ধর intersection হচ্ছে, so this will be the real wage, this will be the number of workers employed. কার্ভটা যদি এখানে থাকে, you have a lower real wage, more workers are employed. Okay, is this part clear? Now let us come to the Keynesian case. You have a fixed money wage, which is given by this level. So given the fixed money wage, the people are willing to work up till this much. How much are they willing to work up till this much? But will they get work?
No, sir.
আচ্ছা। So only this amount of workers will be employed. ঠিক আছে? So employment is determined by the intersection of the wage line and the demand curve for labor. Suppose I increased wages. Okay. So that means we can't change money wage and bring it over here. Again, only this amount is going to be important. So when we are finding out what is the number of workers employed, is labor supply coming into the picture?
No, sir.
It will come into the picture over here. But remember that Keynes was talking about downward rigidity of money wage. So if we start from a position like this, remember that money wages can go up, it cannot fall. So here we have excess demand for labor, money wage will rise, and you will have equilibrium over here. Okay. So if you're talking about downward rigid money wages, you're talking about this part. এইখান থেকে এর ওপরের অংশটা থেকে তুমি কথা বলছো। So at any point over here, it is only the it is only the money wage and the demand curve which sets the optimal employment, the number of workers employed. The supply curve doesn't come into the picture. So the downward rigidity problem comes only in this region. And at this point, we can see that given by intersection of money wage line and ND curve. The supply curve of labor is irrelevant over here. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what happens is, remember this is VMP, price into MP. So if the price increases, the MP curve will shift outwards. What we see over here. Firms will employ more labor. Output is going to go up. So that means corresponding to P0, I have N0 and Y0. Corresponding to a higher price, I've got higher employment, higher output. The supply curve is upward slope. So here we are trying to show this in the ISLM model, so that any increase in demand in such a situation, if the demand increases, okay, this is the supply curve. So if there's an increase in demand, then this is going to increase the output. Price and output both will increase. I'll come to this later, but look carefully into this point. When the demand increases, here I'm showing what is the increase in demand from A to B. That is from Y0 to Y prime 1. So what is happening is demand increases from A to B, from Y0 to Y prime 1, right? But the actual increase in supply is less. It is only from A to C, Y1. Because you can see over here, there's an initial increase because of the change in demand. But the when prices change, the LM curve will also shift. So we see that output increases. In the ISLM model, you would have stopped over here. LM M0, this second LM curve would not have come into the picture. In the IS market, an increase in demand is from A to B. Stop. Once we introduce flexible prices, there is a further shift from B to C. So the increase in output is tempered by inflation. So we can see that if the supply curve is positively sloped, output will increase, but the increase will be less than in the ISLM model. Am I clear? Or do you want me to repeat this?
So could you repeat once?
Okay. Wait, where's my... I'm starting from point A. I'm starting from point A, right? This is my demand for commodities. So, sorry, this is the equilibrium in the commodity market, the IS curve, and this is the LM curve. Okay, so intersection occurs at point A. What is the output? Y0. what happens now is that there's an increase in, let us say, government spending, or maybe taxes are cut. This will lead to an outwards shift in the investment function, in the ICE curve, from ICE, this ICE curve to this one, right? The LM curve is constant. Okay, in fact, let me draw this in a separately. I think that should make it clearer. ফোর দুটোকে আমি সরিয়ে রাখি। Okay, this is the LM curve. Okay. Okay, I think it is better if I draw the diagrams first and then I'll. লেবলিং করতে সুবিধা হবে। Okay. Right. Now let's look at this. See, this is the initial, we are looking at the ISLM model. This is the initial IS curve, IS G0, and this is the LM curve. So equilibrium will occur at E, the output is Y0. Okay. Now suppose that there's an increased government spending, and the increased government spending will shift the IS curve rightwards. So now the equilibrium in the ISLM model occurs at B. So we shift from A to B, the output increases from Y0 to Y prime 1. So there's an increase in G, and this leads to rightwards, equilibrium shifts to B. So output increases to from y0 to y prime 1. Okay, is it clear so far? Then what happens is if your output increases, so over here, this is the demand curve, and now I need the so over here, when we had the IS curve, this was the aggregate demand curve. Okay, and equilibrium, and this is y0. So this corresponds to A. So sorry, I'm taking up some time. This is the aggregate demand curve. This is aggregate supply. So this is when it is G0. Okay, so this is the initial LM curve. This is the initial IS curve. Equilibrium occurs at E. We are supplying Y0. If we look at the aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve, we can draw it in this way. Okay. So this is the initial demand curve. It intersects with the aggregate supply curve at E. Y0 is supplied, and this is the price. Okay. Now what happens is there's an increase in G. The government spending goes up, so the IS curve will shift rightwards. Equilibrium moves from A to B. Output increases from Y0 to Y prime 1. সরি এখানে আমার একটু ভুল হলো। Okay. Sorry, this is actually B. আমার একটু ভুল হয়ে গেছে। So this is the price level. And this is y prime 1. So at the same price level, price hasn't changed. This was the equilibrium output A. The demand curve shifts, and so I move to this point. Okay, B. In the ISLM market, we don't allow for price changes, right? There's no prices in the model. Prices are assumed to be constant. So therefore, in the ISLM model, if when government spending increases, you simply move from A to B, and then the process stops. If I want to use the aggregate demand and supply curves, then the price level is same. You have equilibrium at A, y0 is the equilibrium output. I simply move from A to B, y prime 1. Output moves to y prime 1. That is the increase in output. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Acha. Now what happens is, this is the complete Keynesian model in which prices can also change. If prices changes in the ISLM model, what will happen? Will the IS curve again change? The IS curve has moved from here to here. Will it change again?
No, sir.
Then
The LM curve will change.
how will it change?
Leftward shift. Price is increasing, so the M by P1 ratio will fall.
Exactly. So what we have is the curve will shift like this. Okay. So this is the LM curve for M by P1. In that case, what happens to output now?
It falls.
So the initial movement is from A to B. ISLM model, it should stop. If we allow for flexible prices, see, we have excess demand over here. This is the amount of excess demand. So the excess demand will lead to put an upward pressure on prices that rise to P1. So this is P1. Sorry, it should be over here. In the LM curve, we have M by P1. Okay. So what is the change? This is the increase in the ISLM model. But when we have flexible prices, the increase is only this much. Okay. So in the ISLM model, the increase income is y prime 1 minus y0. In the CKM with flexible market prices, the increase will be y1 minus y0. So this is greater than the increase in the CKM case. So is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in this case, we look at the impact of a change in money supply. So here also, we see that initially, if money supply increases, the LM curve will shift sharply outwards. So equilibrium moves from A to B. The increase is again from Y0 to Y prime 1. The demand curve shifts outward, A to B. So we have an initial, the expansionary monetary policy leads to an increase in demand, as a result of which output should go up, right? Now what happens is, we have in the flexible market, we have excess demand. The excess demand is given by this amount. The supply is only this much. Demand has gone up to B. In the very short run, with constant prices, this would have been the supply curve. So that is why there's no upward pressure on prices. Whatever you demand will be supplied. It's the exact opposite of the classical model. The classicals are saying whatever is supplied will be demanded. The ISLM model, the simple Keynesian model, is saying whatever will be uh, demanded will be supplied. Okay. But if you have an upward sloping price, you'll have supply curve, you have an excess demand which puts pressure on prices, so that demand also falls to from B to C. So net there's an increase from A to C, but the increase is less than in the ISLM case. So here also in the ISLM case, we can see that del Y is less than del Y in the CK. This is A to B, this is A to C. So this is, you can define as so if prices were constant, output will increase to AB. Now we introduce flexible prices, so there's a fall in output, BC. So the net effect is from A to C. Okay. So please try to work it out for yourself. I mean, don't just copy it. Try to, close the book or your notebook and take another paper and just try to draw the diagram yourselves. So in the
Sir,
classical
can you
model,
show
what we
the
see,
previous slide once?
8 na agad na 8.
8. Done, sir.
So in the classical model, we had seen that if there's an increase in money supply, this will lead to simply an increase in prices. There will be no impact on real variables, particularly output and employment. Similarly, if we look at increased government spending, this will lead to readjustment among components of aggregate demand. So consumption, private investment, and G will simply readjust. Government spending will crowd out investment and consumption so that aggregate demand remains the same. So again, output, employment is unchanged. In the Keynesian model, however, both an increase in money supply and an increased government spending leads to increase in output. For instance, if we can think of shocks to the economy, okay, like the change in autonomous investment, shocks to liquidity preferences, this will affect output and employment. Sorry, just one second. আচ্ছা তোমাদের আমি ঠিক কোন জায়গাটা থেমেছিলাম বলো তো আগের দিন?
Sir,
So
absence
the
of
three aspects.
এইখান থেকে স্টার্ট করছি না,
yes, sir.
মানে এইটা পড়িয়েছিলাম তো, এগুলো
না স্যার
পড়িয়েছিলাম।
এইটা
No,
পড়াননি
sir.
আপনি।
মানে এত অবধি পড়িয়েছিলাম তাই তো?
No, sir. Absence of
ও এত অবধি, অ্যাবসেন্স অফ ফর্মাল
Yes, yes, yes.
রেজিডিটি।
Correct.
So
ও
yes.
সরি, আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি ভেবেছিলাম যে আরেকটুখানি পড়িয়ে দিয়েছি, সরি, ওখানে স্কিপ করে যাচ্ছিলাম। ও সেই কারণে তোমাদের এখানটা অসুবিধা হচ্ছিল। ওকে, আচ্ছা, এনিওয়ে, হ্যাভ ইউ, আই হোপ ইউ হ্যাভ আন্ডারস্টুড দিস slides. Okay, but still I'm repeating it. See, when Keynes had assumed that there was downward wage rigidity because of these three reasons. Okay, so now what we are doing is we are introducing this downward wage rigidity into the model. So prices can vary, but the money wage is fixed. Okay, so that means W bar can increase, but W bar cannot fall, which we had shown to be mean over here. That this is the region in which Keynes is talking about, not this part. Over here, money wages can go up. Here, however, because there's excess supply, money wages should fall, but Keynes is assuming that it cannot fall. Okay. So over here, we can see the VMP is shifting outwards. We have different equilibrium points. This output is going up. So the supply curve, instead of being horizontal as in the simple Keynesian model or ISLM, it becomes positively sloped. Okay. So we now have three types of supply curve. The classical supply curve, which was completely vertical. The initial Keynesian curve, which was completely horizontal and which fit in with a depression economy. But in normal circumstances, we are going to get a positively sloped supply curve. So now let us see that what happens if we introduced a positively sloped supply curve. So as you have seen over here, that an increase in G will lead to an increase in output, but the output will be less than in the ISLM model. Okay. Here also you can see that if there's an increase in money supply, then output will go up, but the increase in output will be less than in the Keynesian case. Okay. So, in the Keynesian model, what we have is policy making has an impact on real variables. If you increase your government spending, similarly, if you reduce your taxes, if you go for an expansionary money supply monetary policy, this will lead to increases in output. The impact will be less than in the simple Keynesian case or in the ISLM model, but it will have an impact. We can also think of shocks to the economy. What happens when there's a change in the autonomous investment? Okay. What happens if there's a shock to the liquidity preference? This means that the demand for money goes up. Other things constant, given the rate of interest, for some reason, people lose confidence in banks, so they prefer to hold liquid money rather than invested in bonds. For instance, during the subprime crisis of 2007 and 8, there was an increase in money demand. People felt that financial institutes were not trustworthy. See, what had happened was that the banks and financial institutes had been investing in real estate, what is called the subprime market. And over time, a bubble had been built up. A bubble means that you're investing in assets which are not really sound assets. For some reason, you're buying. People are queuing up to buy land which will not fetch any returns. Okay, it is just a market sentiment. People see that the prices of an asset is going up, so they feel that, okay, if I invest here, I'm going to get capital gains. But actually the asset is worthless. So this happens at different points of time, cyclically. Possibly now this type of bubble is being built up in the financial markets. So anyway, what happened was that financial institutes were investing in real estate, and most of the investment was essentially worthless. Banks were also lending to these financial institutes. Finally, see, when you take a soap bubble and blow it, it may grow large, but it will burst. And this is what happened. It always happens, in fact. And then people lose confidence in banks and financial institutes. So they withdraw money from the share market, from bond market, from banks, and prefer to keep it in the form of, hoard it in the form of cash. So in this case, we can also model this using the ISLM model, this type of model. So here we saw that the money supply is going up from M0 to M1. If people prefer to hold money, if there's a liquidity shock, what will happen? Instead of moving from M0 to M1, we will move from M1 to M0. Okay, so try to model this yourself. M1 to M0, what will happen? Draw the diagrams yourself and try to find out. So this is going to have an effect which is opposite to what we have modeled in this page. But qualitatively, the impact will be same. Okay, you'll have a decrease in output. The decrease will be larger if you hold prices constant, as in the ISLM model. If you allow prices to change, the decrease in output is moderated. Okay. So we had moved away from the ISLM model in one respect. The wage is still kept constant, but we are allowed for price flexibility. Now, let us reintroduce wage flexibility also. So now we have the ISLM model. Prices are flexible. Wages also are flexible. Okay, in that case, by the way, I'll use a small w and capital W interchangeably. In fact, I'd better, otherwise there's going to be confusion. Capital W दे दीजिए. Yeah, I think this is okay. So that means we are going back to the classical model, which assumes that labor supply is a function of real wages, W by P. And this is a positive function. If real wages goes up, you're going to supply more labor. And why? The reason is you're getting more returns to work. And secondly, the opportunity cost of leisure, the price of leisure is increasing. So G prime will be positive. The classical economists argued that the workers would bargain in terms of money wages. But because they also have a knowledge about P, remember the assumption that we had made? In the classical model, you have the auction market type of bargaining and perfect information. So the workers also know what is P. Okay, so if you know what is W, if you set W and you know what is P, you're basically bargaining in terms of real wages. Think about it. You know what is real wages, and that is your decision making variable. So is it clear that they may bargain in terms of money wage, but actually they are focusing on real wages? Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Now, in the Keynesian model, when you bargain, the wage contract is again made in terms of money wages, just as in the classical case. The difference is that workers do not have perfect information. They do not know what is prices. So they know only W. They are interested in real wages, but if they don't know price, can they find out what is real wages? No. The answer is no. So unless they know what is the actual value of P, they will know it's not possible for them to know what is the purchasing power of the money wages. So they go to the market, they say that, okay, I'm prepared to work for a money wage 100. Give me a time. Sorry, the rain was coming in. So in the Keynesian model, both in the Keynesian and classical model, the workers go to the labor market and bargain, and they say that, look, I want 1000 rupees as my money wage. The classical workers have the advantage that they know that price level is, well, whatever it is. Let us suppose it is 2. So that means they are getting a real wage of 500. In the Keynesian case, they don't know what is price. So they don't know how much this money wage will get them in terms of commodities. So how to solve this problem? Because essentially, real wages is important. Suppose I tell you, suppose you're getting money wage of 500 and the price level is 1. Okay. And I tell you that, okay, I'm going to increase your money wages to 4 times, to 2000. Will you accept this money wage?
So can you repeat once?
I'll remove this. Let me give the information. So this is money wage. Money wage is 500 and price is 1. Okay. So I tell you that, okay, I'm going to increase your money wage to 2000. Should you accept it or not?
If I do not have information about P, I will accept it.
I mean, are you better off or worse or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir.
You're better off.
Then I won't.
So in order to find out whether you're better off or not, you require this information. Without this, your decision making becomes flawed. Right? I mean, suppose the worker tells you, no, I will give you just 1000. But price is 1.5. You're better off. In which state are you better off? Obviously this one. This is the better off position. But if you just know what is money wage, you may go for the wrong decision. Okay. So that is why you have to know, you have to have an idea about what is the price level, particularly in the future. So Keynes said that workers will form expectations about the future price level. Unlike the classicals, where we make the strong assumption that they know what is the future price level, they say that, look, I will form expectations. And these expectations are formed on the basis of past behavior of prices. So, in the past, let us suppose that prices, I have a vector of prices. I'll show you how the price expectations are formed. Given the past information about prices, which workers should have, it's not very unusual, they will form an expectation about the future price level. So instead of a function like this, G function of W by P, I'm going to have a function W by expected prices. Okay. So instead of because the classicals have full information, they can put in price. We don't have the full information here. I put in expected price. Is it clear? But the nature of the function is again the same. If I expect real wages to go up, I will supply more labor. If I expect real wages to fall, we are going to reduce the labor supply. Okay? Okay. So the difference between classical and Keynesian labor supply is, in the classical model, labor supply is a function of actual real wages. In the Keynesian model, it is expected real wages. But in both cases, the supply function is positively sloped. Yes, was there a question? Now, how do we form expected? How do we determine expected prices? As I've told you, they depend upon past behavior of the price level. Specifically, we assume that this is the price, this is P equal to 0. So yesterday's price is P minus 1, day before yesterday is P minus 2, and so on. So this is a weighted sum of all the past prices. Apart from this, so this is basically backward looking, right? But what I expect, suppose the economy was in depression so far, and now I expect that the economy is going to rise. So past information is not enough. I also require information to be in the future. What is going to happen in the future? The problem is that there's a cost of gathering and processing such information. Okay. So the information about past prices, they can be observed, and so I can store them and process the information very easily. The problem is I also need information about the future. This information is more costly. Therefore, Keynes assumes that price expectations can be reasonably formulated using this type of model, even though it is rather simplistic. Now, these expectations are backward looking. I'm looking backwards, what has happened in the past, and I'm basically adjusting to the past trends. So that means if something changes today, this is not going to have an impact on my expectations. It is these prices. Okay. So it is prices over a pretty long period of time. So that means the price, even if there's a change, okay. So I move from P0 to P1, then P0 becomes a past price. But expectations will change when I incorporate P0 into my model. P0 becomes the past and comes into my model. But the change in the price expectation occurs very slowly. Okay. So that means the price expectations are also sticky. They change but very, very slowly. And if something happens in the immediate present, it does not have an impact on price expectations. So if there's a policy change, that occurs in the present period, not in the past. So that means in the immediate period, I can take price expectations to be constant. Policy changes will not affect expected prices. So when I'm taking into account, when I'm analyzing the impact of changes in G, tax rate, monetary policy, I can hold price expectations to be constant. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Now suppose prices fall from P0 to P1. Okay. So that means this is the marginal physical productivity curve. I'm multiplying this by P0. So I get VMP 0. Now prices change. Prices moves from here to here. Increases to P1. So the VMP curve will shift outwards. So as you can see, the intersection of wage and remember that wage is now flexible. So now we can bring in the supply curve. Okay. So initially equilibrium is over here. N0 is employed. The demand curve shifts upwards. Equilibrium in the labor market occurs over here. So employment goes up from N0 to N1. Okay, so N0 to N1. So that means output will go up by from Y0 to Y1. Okay. See, Y0 to Y1. BMP shifts outward. Supply of labor will not change because price expectations are constant. So at this amount, we have excess demand for labor, money wages rises to W1, employment rises to N1. Now, tell me one thing, that suppose you had rigid wages. Remember that the last model that we had discussed was only prices can change, not money wages. In that case, what is the increase in employment? Here?
To N2.
No, not to N2. N2 means that this is the MP curve, but something like over here. I'm
Yes.
labeling this. Yeah. Between N2 and N1. So it is greater than N1, right?
Yes.
Let me put it to N prime 1. So there's an increase in employment, okay, from N0 to N1. But the increase is less than in the rigid wage case. If wages are constant, that means the cost of hiring is same, you are prepared to hire more workers. If wage rate rises, your demand will fall down, will reduce along the demand curve. So you move like this. So the initial increase is a shift in demand. This is a movement along the demand curve to N1. What will be the increase in output? Output is going to go up. Will the output be more or less?
Less.
It will be less. Okay. So if you look at the supply curve, I've drawn the supply curve for this flexible wages, money wages. How does it differ from the rigid money wages case? See, in both the cases, we start from here, P0 and Y0. Okay. In case of the flexible money wages, you move to here, right? Because your employment goes from N0 to N1. In case of rigid money wages, what is the increase in employment? To N prime 1, which is greater than N1. So what is this will be the price level, but what is the increase in output? Somewhere over here. This is Y prime 1 corresponding to N prime 1. So if you now draw the supply curve, it is going to be like this. Sorry. So that means this is the rigid wage and this is the flexible wage. Which supply curve is more elastic? Flatter means more elastic.
R.
Rigid wage.
Yeah. Right?
So
So
how
we have a
did we?
positive.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go on, please.
So I wanted to ask, how did we like ascertain the position of N1 prime in the first diagram? Like, how did we put that? N1 prime.
N1. Yeah, this over here.
Okay. That, yes.
This is
Okay.
the initial equilibrium supply. Yeah. N prime is this one. N prime 1 is this one. Okay, so the supply curve is steeper than the rigid wage case. Okay, is it clear? Because I want to remove the markings. If you want to copy it down, then do so. Then I'll move to the next slide.
Sir, can
Yeah.
this be shown in a four-quadrant diagram also?
Sorry, would you repeat your question, please?
Sir, can this be shown in a four-quadrant diagram also? Because, sir, like the Kritika's question, how do we ascertain the position of n prime in the y-axis, in the axis where we show y?
এখানে আমার তো এখানে রয়েছে না, দিস ইজ এন।
Oh, okay, sir.
এবার
So
এন
from
প্রাইম ওয়ানটা তোমার এন এন এখান থেকে আমি কি পাচ্ছি, যে এন প্রাইম ওয়ান ইজ লার্জার দেন এন ওয়ান,
yes, sir.
সো ইট উইল বি আ পয়েন্ট সামওয়্যার লাইক দিস।
Oh, so sir, from the second diagram,
Yeah.
we will plot the third one.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sir.
So it's coming like this. এখানে আমি we are determining n, we are getting y over here, and then this is summing up, bringing the price from here and the y from here. Okay, so I'm removing that. Okay, so the variable, if we allow for variable wages, the Keynesian aggregate supply curve is still upward sloping. Okay, but the changes that shift the aggregate demand schedule will also affect output in that case. So that means if we say that, well, it's not, sorry. If there's an increase in government spending, then the IS curve will shift outwards. We can just model this using the same thing like this. So this is the money supply. This is government spending. So we can model it just like this. Because the aggregate supply curve is upward sloping, only it has become more steep. It has become steeper. Okay, so there's not much, qualitatively, there's not much difference. Right? Whether we talk about an increase in money supply, increase in government spending, tax cut, the aggregate demand schedule will shift to the right. In all cases, you'll have movements like this. The supply curve is positively sloped. So, in both cases, what you will see is price and output is going to go up. The only difference is, remember, this is rigid, and this was the flexible aggregate supply curve. So what does it mean? When I'm talking about the qualitative, what will happen to price and income? The answer is the same. But if I ask by how much prices will go up, by how much, what is del P and what is del Y? What is the answer? In the rigid case, sorry. Yeah. So in which case does the price increase more? Flexible or rigid? Sorry, just give me one minute, please. বৃষ্টি পড়ছে তো, যেতে পারবে না। সরি আমার আঁকাটা ঠিক হয়নি। So this is the flexible and this is the rigid case. Okay. So this is the flexible case, this is the rigid case. So tell me that in this case, where is the output level higher? Flexible case, it is higher, the price increase is higher in the flexible case. Look at the output increase.
Rigid
It
case is
is
higher.
so qualitatively is the same. Prices and output is going to go up, but by how much? Here there's a difference between the two models. Okay, so is there a quantitative difference? When the money wage is a variable, a given increase in aggregate demand will cause output to increase by less than the earlier model. Price level will rise by more than when the money wage is fixed. Okay, the reason is in the steepness of the curves. Okay. So you can see over here, I will come to this later on. Just look at this. I want to end today's class.
Sir, could you show previous slide once?
This one.
Yes, no, sir, the quantitative difference slide. Yes, sir, this one. Yes, sir, run, sir.
Okay. So the next slide I'm going to show, don't write it down because I'll discuss this in more details in the next class. So this is a grand comparison between the ISLM model where wage and prices are constant. The first complete Keynesian model was where we had fixed money wages but flexible prices. We introduced flexibility in one aspect. Here, flexibility in both money wages and prices. There's no supply side constraint. Okay, whatever you demand will be supplied because you have excess capacity. Here, capacity is a problem in both the cases. So as output increases, you're moving down the marginal product curve. Okay. So NP will fall in both cases. This leads to increase in costs because productivity is declining. Okay, so if you want to increase output by 1 unit, if your productivity falls, you need more workers. Costs will go up in both models. Here there's an additional dimension. Money wages was fixed here, but here, because you're demanding more workers, money wages is going to rise. So cost of production rises more. But where is the increase in cost higher? Oh God. It is higher in this case because you just have one component, one pathway through which cost increases. Here you have an additional pathway through which cost increases. So output supplied increases, right? But at higher prices. Here the aggregate supply curve is vertical. Here it is upward rising, but the curve becomes steeper over here. The impact of demand is rise of an increase in demand is okay. Output is going to go up, but by a smaller margin. The output effect will be lower. So what is basically happening is, as we are introducing wage and flexibility in wages and prices, we are moving closer to the classical model. What was the conclusion of the classical model? Changes in aggregate demand will not have an impact on supply. We are not able to replicate that, but the increase, the extent of increase which was occurring over here is going down. So that means we are introducing wage and price flexibility is bringing the Keynesian model closer and closer to the classical case. Okay, but the last 3 or 4 slides I'm going to explain again, so don't worry if you don't understand this. Okay, so from next class I'm going to start after this, from this point onwards, from here. Okay.
স্যার রাইজিং রিয়েল ওয়েজের পরের স্লাইডটা একবার দেখাতে পারবেন?
কোনটে? তোমার কথা কেটে গেল।
স্যার রাইজিং রিয়েল ওয়েজের পরের স্লাইডটা।
এই রে, কোনটে বলো তো? এইগুলো? দাঁড়ান আমি দেখাচ্ছি।
স্যার রাইজিং রিয়েল ওয়েজের পরের স্লাইড। আচ্ছা, হ্যাঁ স্যার এইটা।
যখন থামতে হবে বলো। এগুলো তো পড়াই
আচ্ছা
যায়
স্যার
না।
ভুলে
এটা
গেছে, আমি
last
পরে
time।
নিয়ে নেবো স্যার।
স্যার এটা
ঠিক আছে তো, হ্যাঁ। সরি
স্যার এটা মানে কোন বই থেকে পড়তে হলে?
আমি তো বলেছিলাম ফ্রয়েড থেকে পড়বে। This is Freud, chapter chapter 7. বাহ, জোরে বৃষ্টি নেমেছে। ঠিক আছে, ডোন্ট ওয়ারি অ্যাবাউট দিস। দু একটা এরকম টেবিল আমি করে তোমাদের দিয়ে দেবো, পিডিএফ করে দিয়ে দেবো। ইফ ইউ ওয়ান্ট পার্টিকুলার স্লাইডস, স্পেসিফিক স্লাইডস লাইক দিস ওয়ান, যেটা তোমার এতে নেই, আমি এগুলো দিয়ে দেবো। কোনটে তুমি বলছিলে? কোনটে বলছিলে বলো তো? আমি একদম প্রথম থেকে তোমাকে দেখাচ্ছি। কোন স্লাইডটা তুমি চাইছিলে আমাকে দাঁড়াতে বলে? আদার্স ক্যান লিভ। রাইজিং ওয়েজ।
স্যার একবার 28টা দেখাবেন?
28 এইটে?
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
আচ্ছা,
হ্যাঁ স্যার এইটা।
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, দেখে নাও। Others can leave, please. We'll meet again tomorrow.
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার।
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, sir.
স্যার হয়ে গেছে।
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So stop recording.